4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTK.com, and the other side. And joining us as they do every single week for the MGoBlog Roundtable is the MGoBlog Roundtable crew. And is there anything to talk about? Man, it's something happening every day. Coach is going, coach is staying, candidates being interviewed. There's a big interview today. And so a lot to recap. But first, there are introductions to handle. Starting off first with the guy who started it all, the MGoBlog, Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
I'm well.
Your right-hand man over at MGoBlog is none other than Seth Fisher. Seth Fisher, good morning. How are you?
My wife changed our coffee this morning. It's not working.
And then Mr. Craig Ross. Craig, where are you?
I'm in Kona, Hawaii. I'll be here for a couple of weeks. It's nice here, probably nicer than Ann Arbor in terms of the weather, but I still, whenever I leave Ann Arbor, I do miss it. So anyway, it's 4 a.m. here. So
okay, all right.
And you offered me your Wisconsin tickets, and I didn't take them.
Yeah, I know. I think Alex Drain or his brother might have taken them. I hope so.
Yeah, so to recap as we jump in, the coaching carousel as Sharon Moore looks to complete his staff. There have been a lot of departures, as we well know, as you are basically you're the farm system for 3 NFL teams now with Mike McDonald in Seattle. You got the Ravens, who've had a lot of movement from their staff. And, of course, you have Jim with the Chargers. And so since we were last on, the most recent departure is Mike Elston, who's going to go out to the Chargers. You have Kurt Mallory, who is a sneaky that's a sneaky tough loss, because I don't think people really understand. He was a dude on the back end from an analyst perspective. He goes to be the Ravens secondary coach. So he goes back on the field like he was with the Falcons before he came back to Michigan. Dylan Roney going to go out to the Michigan's GA. His GA time has been exhausted. He's going to go out to the Chargers. I'm trying to see am I missing anyone? But Klink is going to stay. So Klink is going to remain in the fold for Sharon. So he was able to fend off the attempts at Grant and fend off the attempts at Klink. So this musical chairs are ongoing, leading up to an interview today with Wink Martindale, as Joe Cullen sent word back yesterday that he's going to wait till after the Super Bowl. That's just code, and I know it's just code for he's going to see what shakes in the NFL. He has Mike McDonald with the Seahawks looking at him, and then of course Andy Reid, from what I understand, is trying to work some things out there too. So Wink Martindale in the crosshairs for Michigan at this point. Let's just start with you, Brian. Your reaction to the losses, reaction to the retention, and then of course getting the Wink.
Well, I mean, I think keeping Clinkscale is huge. I mean, the guy did incredible work at Kentucky with their secondary, and Michigan started a UMass transfer at one of their cornerback slots this year, and they had the best secondary in college football. So I think that if you told me that there was one guy who was a position coach who I could keep, I would have said Clinkscale, because we've seen what he's able to do technique wise. I feel like, Elston was here and he did a great job. He did a great job at Notre Dame, but just in terms of what Michigan was built on, it was that secondary. And so I'm very happy to get him back. Martindale, I mean, it feels like guys who come back to college and they're 60 plus and they've been in the NFL for 20 years, they just kind of all think that everything around them is like not quite right. It's not what they want to be doing. I'm skeptical, because Michigan built this program in the last 3 years on a bunch of guys who are up and coming and hungry, and they have that in Sharon Moore as their head coach, and I'd like to see that continue. which is why I was very much in favor of Zach Orr, who's the new Ravens defensive coordinator. The profile of a Martindale, like coming back to college, usually those guys, it's like their way or the highway. They're not really interested in listening. They're not really interested in recruiting. And I was willing to do that for a guy like McDonald. But Martindale, I don't know. That one seems like kind of it's just I'm iffy about it personally.
Craig Ross.
Yeah, well, I understand Brian's concerns and they're legit. I mean, is he going to come here and want to recruit? Probably not. It feels like a 1-year stopgap to me, and I'm not sure if that makes much sense. On the other hand, we've had 2 defensive coordinators over the last 3 years anyway. And because they've been a success, they're young, they move on. Martindale's had ups and downs, but he's certainly competent at what he's doing, and maybe he'll be here for 5 years. I guess the question is, for me, is how he fits with the rest of the staff. He can't come in here and have any sort of an attitude other than being the defensive coordinator, it seems to me. And he's got to be able to be deferential to Sharon and to some extent people who've been here, regardless of his role as DC. And so I understand Brian's concerns. He may be right. On the one hand, I'm thinking, oh God, another Greg Robinson, and which is a nightmare. Or on the versus, well, wait a minute, this is a guy who's been success. I mean, and wasn't he the guy who actually, in some context, where McDonald and Minner learned their craft, and so I guess wait and see. But I mean, the key to me is the interview. The interview has to be such that it's clear, he fits in with the culture of Sharon and the remaining coaches.
His personality, I don't know. Stories make it sound like he's a big personality, like he is but let's get something clear here, okay? Greg Robinson did not invent any defenses, okay? Wink Martindale invented the defense that Michigan's running. Mike McDonald was Wink Martindale's assistant. Okay, Jesse Minner came up under him. Zach Orr was a guy that Wink Martindale found. So you want to keep running the Ravens stuff. This is the number one guy you could get to run the Ravens stuff.
No, I don't think I'm not buying that. Like, I'm not buying a guy who hasn't been in college in 20 years, who's 60 years old, is going to come back to college and not understand the environment he's in. Like, I feel like
I'm not saying that, but those are different things. You want to talk about this system that we run, Michigan's how Michigan's defense works, and how the defensive line works with the secondary, and how the way because there's holes in this defense all over the place. It's not it's easy to teach. It's a weird defense.
Like, we're talking about like a guy who at the Giants this year just played Don Brown stuff. Like, he just blitzed, and they finished 27th in total defense, and they got a lot of takeaways. Yeah, 30th in DVOA. Like, that's not something that I'm interested in personally. Like, I don't want a bad NFL coordinator, and he might have been good before, but people change, and it feels like he's not coming up with the times, and he left the Ravens for a reason, right? Like, he
left the Ravens because they wanted to get Mike McDonald.
Okay, that's not, but and he apparently quit the Giants because they fired some linebackers coach, and like he cursed some guy out and left the building. Like, I'm not interested in that as a college coach. Like, I'm not. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's going to work out.
So a couple of things. I think you gotta look at what you're trying to accomplish here. You want to run the Ravens scheme. That's objective number one. This checks that box. You're going to get the guy does everyone have their different spin on it? For sure, because Jesse's version is gonna look different than Mike's, and Mike's is gonna look different than Wink's, but Wink is who they learned under. So if you're looking for the players to not have to change anything, this is the plug and play guy. You bring them in, and you don't have to change any terminology at all. The players can get rolling. So that's number one. Number two, if you're a first-time head coach, and in this instance, Sharon kind of talked about it at his press conference a little bit. His ideology of what he's looking for in a defensive coordinator. He's looking for a guy who has some experience and who's kind of like a head coach on defense. That's why the experience was so important to him to have on that side of the ball. It's why the internal piece wasn't the immediate thing to go to. So you get that. Then you look at how will the players react. And this was a huge deal. And the players are really on board with both of these guys, as a matter of fact. But they knew this name more than they knew Joe Cullen. So that's another factor. And then finally, man, when you talk about recruiting, it's not like the last two coordinators were guys who really did work on the recruiting trail. So knowing that's probably going to be the circumstance here for a guy who's so far removed from the college game and is 60 years old, as you pointed out, you need to backfill around him with pieces that are going to offset that. So that means, who else do you hire? And what do you do in your recruiting department? And these are going to be major, major focuses for Sharon Moore. I don't really hold the Giants against them. I think circumstances matter. People talk about, you look at the team he had, you look at the offense that was there. Clearly there was strife between he and Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll goes and fires some of his guys without even consulting him. That's a big time disconnect. Teams or people who worry about him being this blitz happy guy, man, they say, well, Mike McDonald doesn't blitz all that. But man, Mike, you see that defense? You look at that defensive line that Mike McDonald had with the Ravens this year. Of course, he's not going to blitz a whole hell of a lot. Look at the defensive line that Wink Martindale will walk into. I just have a hard time feeling like the scheme or him running the defense, how they're going to look on the field. I have a hard time finding issue with that. To me, if there's a concern, it's that a guy of this presence, of this profile, would just run over a first-time head coach. If that's your concern, I think that's warranted. But the other stuff about what is he going to do? What is he going to call? How is he going to match up with these college offensive coordinators? I'm not concerned about that.
I mean, I honestly, the running over the head coach thing is probably fine. It's better than what happened to Scott Schaefer, right? Like,
no fooling.
Like if Sharon Moore is like, I want to meddle with the defense, and Wink Martindale hypothetically is like, no, that's for the best. I don't think Sharon Moore is going to do that. But I do feel like it's complicated going from one thing to the other. And I know Michigan had a really good hookup with Mike McDonald in the first year there, but he was here for 1 year and he left. And I feel like if you bring in a guy as a stopgap, that's worse under Sharon Moore than it was under Harbaugh, because Harbaugh would just be like, all right, we're going to get the other guy. And I'm not entirely sure that Michigan is going to have like the ability to get another guy if Wink Martindale is like, I'm an NFL guy, I want to go back to the NFL.
Well, so, I think that's maybe part of your strategy. Maybe he's bringing in a guy he could train as the next guy, or maybe he can turn you on to who the next guy is. Because I think that's part. I think that was part of the process. You were talking to the Ravens guys about who the other guys are. So you were talking to Jesse, and you were talking to Mike McDonald, and you were talking to Wink Martindale, and Wink Martindale said, I could be the guy. Kind of that. Really? You could be the guy? Well, let's talk, kind of thing. And so I guess to me, if you're looking to hit the ground running on defense, your defense, you got dogs. You gotta lock them down. And if you bring a guy who can just let them go, Let them go do what they're doing. The defense should be beastly. They should be outstanding. If to me, where does it matter where the coordinator can run over the coach? First time head coach, the authority, the lines of authority have to be clear to me. And so I think that's where Wink Martindale would have to over deliver. And I think Sharon probably has an understanding of that, because towards the end of the Don Brown piece, it was like Buddy Ryan, Mike Ditka. Don Brown was Don was over on his side, and you couldn't tell him nothing. He's running the defense. You couldn't tell him nothing. Jim Harbaugh couldn't tell him nothing. So that was part of the problem. Sharon has seen that. And I think having seen that, you would understand, like, okay, listen, Wink, if you're going to come in here, man, it's got to be clear. You got to overperform that I'm the head coach. And especially the narrative is out there that you ran over Brian Daboll. I don't even know if that's true. That's perception. Hey, man, this got to be, the lines of authority have to be clear. That is something, I think, for the team. But as far as the scheme, Brian, I'm telling you, man, I just don't know how much better you could have done. If you want an experienced guy that can let these players go do what they've been doing, I just don't think you can find better than Wink.
And
I think we need to make I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm brief. I'm sorry, Seth. Just that, so what Sam's saying is, look, this gives us continuity, a continuity with guys who've been in this defense and have already, proven themselves to some large degree. And two, a part of the deal could be, okay, Wink, we know you're heading back to the NFL, but we want you to develop another person like you have before. You develop a McDonald, you develop a Zach Orr, you develop a Minner, and that can be a part of his job description. We don't necessarily need you to recruit. We need you to develop the next guy that you've already done for us. And if his problem is that with other coaches is that he's been loyal to his own guys and got mad because his own guys were treated unfairly from his point of view. Well, okay. I'm not sure that I dislike that.
I mean, if he tries to bring in NFL position coaches, that's bad. Right?
That's what I was trying to get at here.
Because they're going to be like, what is this recruiting garbage?
Right.
What is this NIL garbage? I don't want to do any of this. And that's Michigan needs every single position coach to be all hands on deck when it comes to recruiting if they're going to be carrying a defensive coordinator who doesn't do it.
I'm jumping out of my seat to say this because I've been trying to say it for 10 minutes. There's a huge difference between Mike Macdonald's recruiting issues and Jesse Minner's, because Mike Macdonald wasn't just one position on the coaching staff, it was two, right? He brought in Hilo, and neither one of them was really recruiting that well. Hilo was better, but I mean, we don't have anybody from Hilo recruiting on the team right now. And that was his guy, right? He wanted to bring his guy. If Wink wants to use another staff position for one of his guys, and that guy's a whole as well, we're talking about another McDonald situation. Now, Minner, he didn't do that, right? They had Hilo for one more year, and then we got Partridge, and Partridge went out and got us a linebacker corps for a couple of years. But you can't have two holes. I'm fine with Wink if he's going to come here and he wants to be the head coach of the defense, and he'll have Grant and Graham and Will Johnson, and he's going to look like a genius. And Alabama's been doing this for ages, right? Where they bring in the NFL guy, he runs their defense for a couple of years, and then he looks like he's great, and they're going to bring him back to the NFL. If he teaches Clinkscale how to do all of it, and that's your floor, is you just make Clinkscale your DC. I don't want to do that because he's one of our best recruiters, and you're going to take a lot, put a lot more on him. But that's the concern here. I think we're way underselling Wink as far as someone who will fit in the system, somebody who is, I mean, you're saying, oh, he's a 60-year-old, he's a guy in his 60s. He's exactly 60, right? And I don't really care what happened in New York, because New York's a flawed organization, and we saw what happened with Harbaugh and the 49ers, and it turned out it was the 49ers' problem, not Harbaugh's problem. And I'm not going to look at anything that happens on the Giants, especially because he didn't even get to run the defense that they run, right? He didn't get to do anything, to make his player personnel decisions. That was probably just a bad situation. You look at what he did with the Ravens. He had one bad year when everybody was injured, right? And everything else in the Ravens, I mean, this guy would be a superstar 2 years ago. And I think that the reason why Ravens let him go is because his contract was almost up, and Mike McDonald was going to go to somebody, and John Harbaugh was like, I want to get my genius. Mike McDonald's not coming here to coach. He's an NFL head coach right now. Jesse Minter is now an NFL DC. We're competing in a stratosphere, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves thinking that that's the kind of person we can always get. I don't know if that guy is out there right now.
Yeah, look, I don't want to. I said this earlier. I'm not selling you a dream. I'm not saying that Wink is going to be able to come in here and be Jesse. I think this is going to be a situation where the student is better than the teacher. Jesse was that good, in my opinion. I mean, no offense to Wink, but man, you talk about to be able to help solidify these guys with the confidence that they can go out and keep it running. They can go out and run it back, because this whole process of protecting this roster, there are levels to it. It's okay, hire a head coach that will stay for. Check. Because you hire somebody else, it'd be like Kalen DeBoer. Well, all the guys going to the portal, so they stayed. Then it's NIL. And I got to give the collectives credit, because the assault on Michigan's roster has been real. The assault from all these programs coming in and trying to poach, and agents shopping to different teams. That's real too. If I'm Sharon, I'm talking to some of these agents like, hey man, listen, we got to have a conversation, because it's not just schools looking at these guys. It's these guys getting shopped. That's a problem. But NIL has really stepped up in a way that has helped Michigan protect the roster. Now it's about who you're going to hire. And if they thought that, man, I don't know about these guys that you're talking to, there are other offers out there. They would be in the portal right now. So it should tell you something that they aren't. Wink Martindale's name is one that resonates in that defensive room, and you need something that resonates in that defensive room. If you want to have the guys, the top guys that you had out there last year, you want those guys back, you need a name that resonates with them, and this is one that does it.
That seems a reasonable point. I mean, he may not be prospectively recruiting, but he may be able to retain what you have. And
to be clear, I don't want to make this sound like a done deal. I don't know that he's going to take the job.
We don't know he's going to take the job.
Yeah, he's going to get offered it if things go well, and why wouldn't they, right? So he's going to get offered the job. Now, will he take it? We got to see.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think I think it works out for both parties. I don't want to portray this like, oh, Michigan is settling because they couldn't get their guys. Wink is definitely one of the people in the small list of people that you would say, okay, if we can go get that guy, let's go get that guy. He is the one who invented this defense we're running. I don't think he's going to last here very long because he wants to go back to the NFL, but we're going to get our deal out of it. He'll come in here to train somebody else to be able to do this. Maybe it's Klink, whatever. But he's going to come and run this defense. They're going to be like a top 1 or 2 defense next year in the country. And then he'll ride that back to the NFL, and we'll go and get the next guy, and it'll be fine. But that's what we want out of the situation, and that's what he wants out of the situation. I think when I looked at who we could possibly get, my first hope was like, okay, who's the greatest defensive coordinator in the country right now? And I'm like, well, we just signed him to the NFL. So what are you going to do?
You know what? Talking to you guys, I mean, that's a thing. And this is a thing that I would talk to Klink about, Brian, because let's say Wink is here a year or two, and who's the next guy? Is it an NFL guy he brings in? Or is it Steve Clinkscale? And if I'm Sharon, I'm talking to Klink like, okay, look, you had an issue with not being the DC right now. Well, let's talk about how that can happen. You need to be in Wink's back pocket. Learn from Wink, and we could maybe have a progression here that would make that make sense, because there was a serious look at going with Jim and the Chargers, and Jim made an offer to get him to come out there, but he's back, and that it didn't go away to him being he wanted to be a play caller. He wanted to be the DC. Well, this is how we can make that make sense. Learn under Wink. The same guy who trained the last 2 defensive coordinators can maybe train you. I can see that as a vision that could work.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, at that point, he'd have 5, maybe 6 years of experience in the same defense. Like, I think obviously he's very good at lots of parts of his job, and I don't think that being the defensive play caller is beyond him in any way whatsoever. So I do think that that idea kind of mollifies me about, okay, what happens when this short timer, because he's going to be a short timer realistically if he does come. What happens when he goes? So that if that can be communicated and seems like a plan, then that does make me feel better. Now, you still got to fill out the rest of your openings with some dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So, because this isn't going to get any easier. The current state of college football is even more of a nightmare for coaches than it was before NIL. Because now, not only do they have to recruit high school kids, they got to recruit their entire roster every year. So, until we get to the point where there's a union and there's some contracts, and interestingly enough, there was a NLRB assertion that Dartmouth players were employees, which is very tenuous for Dartmouth, but accurate for Power 5 football players. Like, we could see some movement there, and hopefully at that point things get a little bit easier because you'll have some sort of certainty on your roster year to year. But
I need to really give credit to, because I've been talking for weeks, months, even going back to the beginning of the season, about how there needs to be a greater understanding of what donor and collective support needs to look like, right? What it needs to, the response that needs to be put forth, and they're stepping up, like, in a big way, and that should not, for as much talk as I've placed toward it, as much voice as I've lent to that, for them to be stepping up in a way that they're stepping up right now to protect this roster, because it's been obscene, the poaching. And I'm not saying that from the standpoint of let's report. NCAA is no protection, right? This is what's going on. The only protection is your people, your donor support, who understands that, hey man, it might, some guys you're gonna have to let go. If they want to pay 175 stacks for a backup, you gotta let that go. But for some of the other guys, for your top guys, yeah, you gotta come up with some big time deals, and they are doing it. So between that and then making the players whole that way, and then giving them a coach that they can feel good about, I think for all the losses that we've seen, especially losing Ben Herbert, because that was big. I mean, to give them a guy that they're like excited about, that's significant. And the click scale, I want to give you guys credit for that, because I wasn't even thinking about, it being maybe an understudy kind of training sort of thing. But that's just something that Sharon is going to have to address too, because he was really wanting to be the play caller. You didn't make him be that, and that's one of the reasons why he was looking around. Well, how can you bring that back together in a way that's cohesive? And to me, it's like, hey, I'm bringing him in, but he's not going to be around that long. We all know he's going to be here. He what, 2-year guy, maybe 3. Yeah. Who's going to be next? Well, if you train under him under these next few years, and the players start to buy into, yeah, you can do this too. Guess what? You're the next guy. I can see that being a thing.
I would say that if Michigan's defense is kick ass again this year, that Wink will be gone after a year. So in terms of Clink, could be a pretty ideal situation, to be honest. So, you've talked to me. I mean, and you guys have talked me into the notion where I was kind of agnostic talking into the notion maybe this really is a really good hire. I mean,
don't call it a hire yet.
If it happens, I mean, if Sharon and Martindale can talk and sort of work through roles and what things are going to look like, then I think I'm in.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, he's got to take the job, and if he doesn't, people keep asking. I think the expectation is, if they offer it, he'll take it, but you can never get. If he doesn't take it, to me, You know who I would actually take a look at Kurt Mallory. I really would. I really would. The his
As
connection
DC?
with Jesse Minter, his connection with Minter was to the point where I really feel like he played a big role in Michigan on the back end, their coverage variations. The strategy of it. And so you weren't going to be able to keep him as an on-field coach. I think that was considered, but if an NFL team offered him an on-field job, he was gone. And of course, the Ravens, the Ravens came and did it. But as you come back around, you know, I don't think some of the guys that left are all off limits. Like Dylan Roney going to be a QC guy. You know, he was a hell of a recruiter as a GA. I would take a look at that guy. And
where did Roney go, Sam?
With the Chargers, because what was going to happen? Jesse was going to make Dylan Roney the linebackers coach, or excuse me, that was going to be Jesse's recommendation. Now it's Jim's decision who the linebackers coach is going to be, but Jesse wanted it to be Dylan Roney. And so if it stands to reason, if he was going to push for Dylan Roney to be the linebackers coach, of course he's going to come get that guy. He doesn't have any GA eligibility left. So the only way for Michigan to really keep him is to make him an on-field coach. So I think that that's still something that you can go for potentially, depending on what happens with Wink. And same thing with Kurt Mallory. You aren't going to be able to keep him as an analyst, but if something happens with Wink and he goes and you need someone who could come in and run this scheme, do what you've done, who was instrumental in strategy and implementation and all of that, who's called a defense, I would look at him. If we're just talking about a guy who could come in and keep it rolling.
Yeah, so, if you bring in Mallory over Klink, I think that'll be it for Klink, though. I think, yeah, I mean, he's going to be DB's coach for Jim, right? Like he's going to. That's what Mallory's doing out there.
For John, yeah.
He got hired by the Ravens.
Or for the Ravens, sorry, yeah. Well, for Harbaugh. We did elevate JB Brown to special teams coach, and he was working under Jay, I think, and he's another one of those guys that like he wasn't an on-field coach, so we weren't talking about him. But then when you mention him to somebody in the program, they're like, "Oh yeah, that guy. I'm glad we kept that guy." I didn't know, Sam, if you know more about him than I do.
Yeah, same thing. He was Jay's right-hand man in everything. He was Jay's right-hand man when it came to special teams. He was Jay's right-hand man when it came to safeties. I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up in that room with Klink. I don't know what they're going to do with analysts coming forward. We got to see how the rest of the staff kind of shakes out. I mean, you got to get the defensive coordinator hired, and then you can figure out the rest and figure out whatever's left offensively. You got a negotiation going on with Mike. You got to see how that goes, and then settle things from there. So you're right, Brian. How does the rest of the staff fill out from a recruiting perspective is really important, including the recruiting department, which by every measure is going to be improved. They're going to add personnel. They're going to add scouting. They're going to add when it comes to relationship building. Every single aspect of recruiting is going to be addressed because it's just for Sharon's. I'm not saying what Jim was bad, but I think Sharon's where he is as far as recruiting is concerned and what he wants to put into it is different than Jim, if that makes sense. So we'll see how it goes. We need to get a break in. I know we're way past the break, so we'll squeeze it in now. Come back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider MGoBlog Roundtable, Sports Talk 1050 WTKA The Ticket.
Thank you, Sam. Clear on the radio.
All righty. Yeah, I was like, shoot, it's 9:44.
Did you guys see? I'm sure you did the stuff with the is it Leah Alai, the basketball player from
Aaliyah.
Aaliyah.
Yeah.
I mean, $900. Is that the deal? He got paid $900 in room and board, and the NCAA is.
Oh, I didn't know that was what it was over.
$900.
Yeah,
no, he passed the test.
There's an MLive article about it.
Okay.
Where they're like, they wanted him to get grocery receipts from 2 years ago because they thought he was being paid more than the cost of living. And so they wanted him to pay like $15,000 and be suspended for 20 games. And they strung him along until now. It's like Jamal Crawford, except
Yeah, that's Jamal Crawford all the way.
All right. Yeah. I mean,
like, what are we? This is 2024. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, of all the NCAA things in the past year, this one makes me the maddest. It's like,
me too. It's outrageous. I mean, here's a kid who wants to go to college, and they allege he got $900 in grocery money. And they're going to keep him out of college over $900 in grocery money because the kid can't find receipts. I don't keep receipts. I don't know any 18-year-old who keeps receipts. I mean, come on. This to me is directed at Michigan, not the kid, but the real fallout is for the kid because now he's going to go to Spain, I guess. But that's not what he wanted.
I wish I could. I wish
he wasted a season. He wasted a year of his life.
Yeah.
Like trying to get into Michigan, and it's just like,
it's more evidence that the NCAA is antithetical to what the NCAA is about. That the NCAA, what they say they're about is education and the benefit of the kids. And whenever they get an opportunity to make a decision between maintaining their structure and making money and allowing the rampant cheaters to go ahead and do whatever they want to, they just go ahead and do that. But whenever they have an opportunity to protect someone's education or keep somebody in school who wants to stay in school, they don't do that. The NCAA is antithetical to everything the NCAA says it stands for. And, this is going to go by the wayside because it was a basketball player on a bad team that wasn't going to change anything. But this should be the last straw. When you look at this story and see what the NCAA did, and then try to figure out what happened, work back. Who was making these decisions? Who was asking for these receipts? The people in charge of this thing are not even full-time employees. They're just.
I mean, they should have enrolled him and played him anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Like
that's what Brian, I'm with you on that. I say the hell with them. Bring them into school, play them, and then if they do anything, sue them.
Back on radio in about 30 seconds.
And that's
what you have to do nowadays. That's exactly what you have to do nowadays.
Because this is right in there. I mean, I thought we got hammered with Jamal Crawford before. It was outrageous.
And Mitch McGarry.
Yeah, it's the same.
I don't know.
Another guy who wanted to be in college.
Yeah.
He wanted to be in college another year, and what did they do? They made this whole thing over a rule that they had already gotten rid of.
Yeah, well,
just so they can nail him.
I mean, what are you going to do, bureaucrats? Fire them all into space.
Back on radio in about 10 seconds, guys.
Yeah.
And we are back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back. Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Before we get back to the roundtable, want to let you folks know, my friends at Chelsea Lumber, they're your one-stop shop for all of your home improvement needs. Of course, when it comes to renovations, kitchen and bathroom especially, no place better to go than Chelsea Lumber. That's where we went, the Saline location, kitchen and bath center. Our designer was second to none, came up with an awesome design, even helped us find a contractor that brought that design to life. The Chelsea location has a kitchen and bath design center as well. Guess what? They're actually renovating the design center, but still open while they're doing the renovations. Might be a little mess, but they'll still impress you. Promise. Just make it on out to that location as well, or the Saline location. If you have your kitchen and bath design needs, they'll help you with that. Chelsea Lumber, where the home begins. You can find them online at chelsealumber.com. So, guys, kind of a, rapid fire. I hate to do that with a few different topics, but Brian, you mentioned the Dartmouth unionization thing that's about to happen. It feels like another sort of existential crisis for the NCAA on the heels of one with the Tennessee Attorney General suing them. What do you think the implications of this will be? Do we see the quicker demise of the NCAA, which we were talking about in the break, as they kept Leah from enrolling at Michigan?
Well, so the National Labor Relations Board is appointed by the current administration, so it goes back and forth depending on if it's a Democrat or a Republican. And the last time this happened, I believe it was a Republican administration, and they were like, "No, you're not employees." So it's going to depend significantly on the 24 election. Not to get too political, but if a Republican takes office in 2024, it's likely that this regional board ruling gets appealed up to the national level and gets overturned. So,
question for you, real quick, because I want to ask you a question about that particular thought. It really feels like, as NIL has become more of a national topic, that the support for opposition to the NCAA has been more bipartisan. Do you not sense that would be a factor here?
I feel like this might be an exception because the perspective of college athletes unionizing would not be great for a Republican administration. So I think that they would be opposed to that in particular, and while they would be okay paying people under the table or for whatever reason, like they don't like unions. I'm trying not to
like grift.
Yeah, they do. Thanks. I was trying to keep it like neutral, but
right.
It is what it is. Mm-hmm. So if I think that the courts are a much more reliable path towards the total dismantling of the NCAA. And that's going to take some time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it seems to me that the Northwestern students a decade ago or whenever it was were exactly right when they tried to unionize. And it seems to me you're not going to have a coherent system until you have unionization among athletes, until they're employees, they're paying taxes, and you've got a coherent set of rules. The current situation makes no sense, is all I can say. And it is a system of grift, and from my point of view. And so I hope this, becomes the reality for college sports.
I agree with everything you guys are saying. I want to bring up a couple pieces that are. I'm not saying like this is going to stop it from happening, but why there's so much on the top level, why there's so much holding on to the current system. One, they've been laundering all the money that comes into colleges through building projects, and those building projects pay out over many years. So the schools don't. We think that they're awash in money. They technically are, but they found ways to make it look like they're not making money. That's one piece of it. Another piece of it is donors who've been giving a lot of money over many years, who are doing it under the table, are liable for taxes for that. Those are gifts, and if you have gifts over $10,000, you have to pay taxes on it. And one of the concerns is, I was talking to a Georgia guy. One of their main concerns, and one of the things they're thinking about actually having the coaches, having the program ask their state legislature to do, is once this stuff starts coming out and you figure out who were the big money guys, if the NCAA ends up having to say, hey, you guys have to report money that previous people made, there's going to be a lot of people who have big tax bills, who are big donors for the program. And I think one of the things you're going to see quietly happen fairly soon are some of these legislatures also going to protect those donors, because when you talk about who has the political clout and who's moving a lot of these conversations, that's where the opposition's coming from. That's who the problem has been all along, and they are powerful people who have a lot to say. And I watch that because I think it's going to happen in Georgia soon. And I think it's going to happen in Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee soon after that.
Yeah, they're just saying death by 1,000 pinpricks. This does, though, even if it's not this particular case, it just feels like it's death by 1,000. They catching bullets, man, not pins. Because Tennessee Attorney General, he threatened them before. You guys remember that when he said, "Well, if you give us a postseason ban,
Right.
I'm gonna sue you because you're messing with NIL." Then they actually, I guess, they're investigating. Soon as we're suing you right now because you're messing with NIL. Now there was a temporary stay. They gave him a TRO, I guess, right? But Ira was going over this on the air yesterday. It made it sound like the judge in the judge's ruling, I don't know if it was a man or woman, made it sound like, well, this is actually a good case. that
Right.
Tennessee
Right. The
had.
TRO was turned down because you can be made right with money. We
Yeah.
learned all about TROs when Michigan went through this recently.
Mhm.
And one of the main things is if you can take care of it monetarily, then it's not you don't need an emergency relief. And
Yeah,
that was what the judge
it's
said.
called adequate remedy at law. So
Yeah, so it
money.
sounds like the NCAA is in real trouble. And the reason why we got on that topic is because you guys talked about the case of Leah. And for folks who don't know, because I hadn't actually been obviously tunnel vision here the last couple of days, I hadn't read that story. But as you mentioned it, I thought immediately of Jamal Crawford.
Yeah.
Craig. That is one that will stick in my craw forever, probably Jamal's forever.
Yeah,
Mitch
will.
McGarry was more recent. This is just the latest screw job from the NCAA.
I mean,
Yeah.
the NCAA preventing people who want to play college sports from playing college sports has got to be the dumbest thing in the history of the organization.
Yeah, but it absolutely is, but that's who they are.
Can you
It
share real
also-
quick? Can you share what happened with Leah real quick?
So Aaliyah was compensated by a team in Argentina for cost of living, basically. And the NCAA wanted extensive documentation from an 18-year-old kid about grocery receipts and all that kind of stuff, and they eventually came to a conclusion that he had to pay back like $15,000 and was going to be suspended for 20 games. And he said, no, I'm going to go to Spain. A ridiculous. I mean, it's 2024. We are legalizing guys getting millions of dollars from NIL, and they are complaining about this guy getting chump change in Argentina. And I mean,
for his food while he was playing on the touring team.
And it's just like some guy in a suit who's been doing the same job since 1979 and hates it and hates everybody around him is screwing this kid out of the opportunity to play for the University of Michigan. There could not be a better example of why the NCAA needs to die yesterday.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on this. I read the article, and it just made me furious because, again, like the Crawford case or like the Mitch McGarry case, you had someone who wanted to go to school, wanted to play basketball at the NCAA level, and the NCAA stopped him for no good reason at all. For no reason at all, truly.
He wanted to come. He wasn't just because he wanted to play basketball for the NCAA. He wanted to make this decision because he wanted the education in Michigan. That's what he was really coming for. The number one thing that he wanted to come for was the education in Michigan. And Jamal Crawford was the same example.
Oh, yeah.
Crawford wanted to come here because he wanted an education at Michigan. And for some reason, the NCAA's biggest problem seems to be when somebody wants to go to college for an education as opposed to just making them money. I don't know why they decided that that's the line that they're going to cross. And I wish that I didn't have to sound like Craig here and think that someone's really got it in for Michigan. But it does feel like it because when it happens with a guy who wants to go to Michigan. It's probably happening because somebody there doesn't believe that these kids ever wanted to go to school. You remember when Penn State got in trouble, and obviously they deserved some major trouble for what went on there. But one of the things the NCAA did was they said anyone on that team can transfer right away. And that was supposed to be the biggest punishment. And then most of the kids stayed at Penn State because most of the kids were at Penn State because they wanted a degree from Penn State, which is a fantastic university. And this surprised the hell out of the people who made the decision. They thought if these guys aren't, if the scholarship money is going to go down, if they're not going to be winning, that these guys are going to transfer in a moment. And it doesn't even cross their mind that going to a good school to get an education and play sports would be meaningful to these guys.
We will obviously pick this up another time, as this is an ongoing topic. Always a great time with the roundtable. Check them out on MGoBlog.com. We got to get out of here. We'll see you tomorrow on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket, Ann Arbor, a community.